How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, we're going to continue the discussion with the active shooter case that happened in Minneapolis. The shooter right here, Robin Westman. And right now, the new discussion is related to Robin Weston's mother, Mary Grace Weston. And now she has decided to seek counsel. My guest today is going to be Lieutenant Joseph Pangaro. And we're going to talk about why parents may choose to seek counsel during these cases. And when I say parents, parents of the shooter, the assailant. I watched a great interview the other day on YouTube with Dr. Oz and Susan Klebold, who's the mother of Ryan Klebold, who was one of the shooters during Columbine. And man, her perspective was just so unique, and to be able to hear her side. And then I also purchased her book, but her book didn't come in yet. I do want to read it and then maybe do a little discussion about the book. But her interview, if you guys got a chance to check out that interview, I definitely would check out that interview. But right now, as you're looking through the algorithm of what YouTube is serving related to this case, you're either going to get political arguments, transgender versus gun rights. And again, somewhere in the middle is the answer. It's not really on the extremes of one side winning and one side losing, but where we're at in the middle, because that's where most changes take place. And a lot of people are also attacking the mother, thinking that she's going for counsel because she knows she's wrong, or she may have some involvement. So she's trying to protect herself. And maybe that could be the case. Maybe. But I also think that there's a lot of reasons why people will seek counsel. So me and my guest, Joe Pangaro, are going to paint that picture, try to be a little bit more objective so we can have a better understanding as the case progresses. And hopefully that understanding alleviates some level of judgment, because I get it. The public needs somebody to blame, and the shooter, did take her own life. So at this point here, who else do we hold responsible? So of course, everybody looks at the parents, but is there a chance that the parents may not have known? I mean, is that possible? I mean, when they interviewed Susan Klebold, she clearly stated, I didn't have a reason to look at my kids' journals and stuff like that because I trusted them. And I think there's a level of that trust that doesn't make you second guess them. So it is a shock. When she saw the video, she was still shocked that was her son. So I think there's a lot that goes into play here. But let me get Joe. What up, Joe?
How are you today, Anthony?
Good, Joe. It's good to have you back on. I think it's great to now continue the dialogue. I've seen where the updates are. They're talking about the mother seeking counsel. And of course, everybody's giving their opinion of why they think she did it. But most of the opinions leaning towards she has something to hide. So I thought me and you could have a very good objective dialogue discussing kind of all the different reasons why somebody may want to seek counsel, including the mother or parent of the active shooter. Hey, but Joe, do you mind introducing yourself again to our audience?
Sure, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Joe Pangaro, retired several years ago. I spent 27 years in law enforcement. The majority of that was spent in the investigative division. I became a school security director after I retired. I write all kinds of books and articles, and I do presentations. I have a company, Pangaro Training, and I train police officers, school personnel, business people on safety and security topics in their workplaces. And I go out and I do threat assessments all across the country to help people understand the security gaps that may exist in their facility. And I come here and I talk with Anthony to try and help us understand some of the things going on in the world.
And what you do is so neat. And guys, just as a catch up, August 27th, Robin Westman, formerly Robert Westman, shot up Annunciation Church, which is also connected to the school where children were attending mass, and it led to multiple children injured, some adults as well, parishioners, and 2 children dying. She murdered 2 children. Basically, there was very lucky that the church decided during their service that they locked the door from the outside, but you could still push in from the inside, because that forced her to now go around and start shooting from the side of the building. And yes, there were still 2 lives, but there could have been many more if she was able to get in and then put that wooden block on the door, trapping people. Now, at this time, they've been going through the manifesto. Guys, if you haven't, me and Joe did a 3-hour video that breaks this down. The manifesto, just a bunch of stuff. What happened? Joe provided excellent insight. And we also have another show that me and Joe did as well that talks about more of the tactical side of how to defend a vulnerable target. The show we did a couple of days ago, which is titled, let me give you the title of that show. We did it a couple of days ago. The title is From Manifesto to Mayhem. Breaking down the mind, and motive behind the violence. Guys, it's a very deep discussion. Definitely not going to find it anywhere before. And by the way, if you look at the date of that, when we got to the end and we started translating the memo, the manifesto, we predicted a lot that's now being predicted as we speak, because now they have more information out there. But again, today we're going to focus more on the mother seeking counsel, because that seems to be where everybody's going. So I got a couple of things here, Joe, before I ask you your first question is, I want to go first with, basically, if I was a parent of an active shooter, God forbid, but if I was, I may want to go help as best I could. I may want to jump in and get right involved with the police investigation and let them know everything that I feel could help them. But with that said, sometimes narratives could be shifted. There could be pressure to hold somebody fully accountable. And sometimes they could be asking you questions that could accidentally incriminate you. So it's always good to have somebody in the middle to make sure that they're protecting your rights as, yes, you may be the mother or father of this individual, but you are not the one that did the shooting. And therefore, I'm not saying you're 100% clear of the outcome, but there could be a chance that you really did not know. And what's going to happen here during these interviews is that the investigative authority is going to try to prove some act of prior knowledge, maybe some act of negligence, either way. So when you have an effort to help and be open, you may wind up answering questions that you may not fully understand the consequences of. So again, not minimizing what if she is responsible, then I don't know that just as yet. So I'm trying to be fair. And this is, in my mind, why she may choose to seek counsel, because again, it'd be more to protect her rights. And most likely counsel may even came to her saying, hey, before you do any interviews, we know this is going on. Let us go ahead and represent you so we can make sure that your interests are protected while they go ahead and try to find full accountability for what is happening or what had happened in Minneapolis. So I got a couple of things here, Joe, I wanted to read off. I saw 3 things that I feel a parent could be charged with if they somewhat may have involvement. So what I have here is knowledge of imminent threat. So investigators can prove she knew her son intended to commit violence and failed to warn authorities, she could face scrutiny. Reality, this is very hard to prove unless she directly saw messages, weapons prep, or threats. It's unlikely to lead to charges unless they could prove it. Negligence in supervision or duty to act. So if investigators find she ignored extreme warning signs, threats, manifestos, violent behavior, they could push negligence arguments. This is rare, but high-profile shootings often invite scrutiny into what family members knew. And guys, when it comes to negligence really relates to the consequences of the actions of being negligent. So if I was negligent and nothing happened, it could be a bit of a warning. Got to do better. But when something does happen, it becomes a bit different now, because now there could be criminal charges involved. So the negligence is a lot more severe in nature. I have civil liability. Wrongful death lawsuits, even without criminal charges, victims' families may sue her if they believe she knew about warning signs or allowed weapon access. So basically, could she have aided and abetted? And civil lawsuits have a lower burden of proof. So this is very real worry for her. And Joe, I have 2 questions related to this right now. First question for you is, from your investigative experience, how realistic is it to expect parents to recognize imminent threats or red flags before a tragedy occurs? Because that's the popular topic right now.
Yep. And I think, as in our program, the last program we did where we kind of discussed this, since then, I've had quite a few conversations with people who have listened to the program, watched the video, and came up with their own questions for me, trying to kind of follow up. And I think it is, my son actually said something to me. He had listened to it. He goes, you know what? I think people might be blinded by the fact that it's their own kid, and they would never think their own child would be capable of such a thing. Now, they might see problematic behavior in the child. They may see that this young person may have articles about shooters hanging up on their wall. And they feel very uncomfortable about it, but they really don't believe that young person is going to go get a gun and go shoot and kill innocent people. So you can see them holding back a lot on that. I think often when you have someone as disturbed as this person, as this guy was here, I think the parents had to have some inkling that there was potential danger for him, to himself or to others. I think that probably would be pretty clear based on everything he was doing and how he was behaving. And he was right in the house. They could have known nothing. It's surprising sometimes when you get into someone's house. You know, you open the door behind someone else's life, you open that curtain, and you get to go back there as a law enforcement investigator. It's sometimes things you would think would be crystal clear to everyone are just not. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they weren't paying attention. Maybe they thought it was part of whatever he was going through himself. Maybe that was an outlet. A million things could happen to have them maybe not see it for what it was, or think that it was a real potential. In other cases, I think parents absolutely see the danger and they're not sure exactly what to do. What do you do? Do you go to the police and tell them that your son or your daughter is plotting a mass shooting? Now, you would think that you would do something as a parent, but as we've seen in many of these cases, lots of times people don't get involved. When we investigate it later on, they say, oh, we had some idea this person was dangerous, but that's just the way he was. That's just the way she was. That's how they talked. They were coarse, and that's how they used words. Never really thought it would happen. Couldn't believe my neighbor was eating people and keeping him in the refrigerator. I thought he was a nice guy, right? So we see that repeated over and over and over.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, when we look at it from the outside, it's in a greater context. There's greater meaning to that, where they may be dealing it in moments that in their mind are irrelevant to connect. You know, sure, he had a breakdown a couple of years ago. Well, couldn't you see that? Well, it was a breakdown over this. I mean, I didn't know it was going to lead to this. I mean, but now there's a bigger picture. Sure, it could all connect. But with that said, at that time, it may not connect. And again, guys, this is just a perspective, because at the end of the day, we don't know. Maybe she was involved or whatever. But we want to provide another side that's not being provided. And again, it's not to give an excuse, but rather just information of how to be a little bit more objective when reviewing this. And the funny thing, and Joe did mention about parents, remember, there's so many reasons why they may not want to see what other people could see. And maybe there's a feeling. But even when something does happen, even if it's someone that had it does make sense to them, they're going to push it all down. Because at the end, there's no way I raised somebody that be willing to do that. And that denial is so strong that it becomes their reality. You know, so what we see without connection to that individual is a lot different than what they're going to see. And trust and believe that's 100% truthful, because, you know, I mean, I have my kids. I love them to death. And, you know, I'm always giving them excuses for things that, you know, I hope aren't major later on, but are very small in the moment. But if you put it all together with this bigger picture, you can make anything look like that through hindsight bias. And the second question I have related to this, Joe, is in high-profile shootings, do you think civil lawsuits against parents are more about justice or about finding someone to hold accountable when answers feel out of reach? And that's why I feel the pressure comes in. And that's why I think even if she is innocent, you may want to get the lawyer, because there could be pressure from the other side to create narratives that may kind of blur the story a little bit.
Well, that's a good question. And we know one of the things that I teach when I teach an organization, they bring me in and they want a threat assessment. They want their staff trained. And sometimes they have to look at it and say, is this expenditure of money worth this, that, and the other thing? And the thing I try and tell people is, if you have any kind of an incident in your facility, school, business, church, anything happens with violence at all, there's going to be a lawsuit in the end, whether it's a criminal charge against somebody in your organization for what you did or didn't do, or if it's a civil lawsuit. People are coming after you for a remedy, usually in money, to compensate them for what happened, or to punish, right? So we're going to punish you the only way we can, and we'll take money from you. So the reality is that when people look at that, I think a lot of attorneys might jump in and say, hey, deep pockets, they'll settle, we'll get something out of this. The parents don't want to do it. And then there's other people that might look at it and say, this is the only way we can have someone held accountable. Because like you said, the standards are much lower for a civil type of a trial. You have the preponderance of the evidence. Does it look more like this than that, as opposed to a criminal trial where you have beyond the reasonable doubt, right? Beyond the shadow of a doubt kind of a thing. So it's much easier. We look at the OJ case. It was pretty clear to everyone who was clear thinking at the time that OJ Simpson killed his wife and the fella that was there at the time. There was jury nullification. The jury, it was all political. There was all kinds of things going on, and people didn't want to believe it. They didn't want to believe a nice guy like OJ would do this. And the families that were victimized saw the same thing that I saw. It was obvious OJ did this, and they couldn't have him held accountable criminally, so they went after him civilly, where he was found responsible for the murders, right? Not that he was criminally convicted of killing people. He was responsible for it, and a judgment was put in place of $33 million, I think, to compensate them for what had happened. In their case, I don't think it was about the money. I think it was about making sure that the person who did this was held accountable, at least in the public's eye, in a court somewhere. Yes, you did this. As opposed to other people, I think, like anything, there's when there's money changing hands, it can change people's opinions of things. It can change how people deal with each other. Don't we see families all the time that are really tight and united, and then a parent dies and there's an inheritance, and next thing you know, everybody's fighting. They're at each other's throats over this money or some kind of value of things. So when you bring value into it in a civil case, there can be lots of reasons why people would want to go that route. But in many cases, which like this is probably going to be, at least they'll be held accountable, because the person who did it is dead. So now what do we do next? How do we hold somebody accountable?
Yeah, and so obviously, why retaining counsel for this side? We have it for protection from interviews, so investigators may ask what she saw, heard, or suspected in the weeks before the shooting. You got the shield from civil suits. Victims' families will likely look at anyone close to the shooter to hold responsible. And then there's pressure with that, by the way. Lot of victims here, so a lot of pressure. And managing media pressure. High-profile cases often turn parents into secondary targets for blame. All right, so now I'm going to get to the other side, kind of like the softer side. So, why parents retain counsel? It's going to relate to why they may need counsel now. So the points I got here for the first section is they may feel personally scrutinized by investigators, media, or the community. They could fear being implicated themselves, as we talked about, and they may want to protect family privacy and control the narrative, because, again, you're going to have investigators come from the outside and media, and they're going to open up every family secret out there, even secrets that may not really pertain to what happened here. I mean, right now they're talking about dialogue that happened between the mother and Robert before it became Robin, before they made the transition. Now, we don't know if being a transgender is part of it. I mean, we said in the show it could be, or it may not be. But, how the mother reacted to it, a lot of people on YouTube right now are saying, well, the mother could have been a cause because of the way she reacted when, you don't know how someone's going to feel when someone breaks that news to you. And it may not always be something that, I'm disgusted about. I don't want you being that. No, it could be, I know that's going to be a difficult choice. Do you really want to make sure you want to do that at this age? So it could be an effort to protect the child, or it could be an effort like, she's Catholic background, went to that church, and there's a fear of judgment, not just against him or who became a her, but also the family itself. So there could be some vanity in there. But now a simple dialogue like that, a simple exchange, could be what the outside thinks, could be the trigger of it all. And, and so it opens up things that, you may want to protect, like a conversation between me and my child when they're going through a very tough moment now becomes something years later that could be the main motive, and it's just anything right now that's being discovered now becomes the center point. And I'll think about a mother on that, as I said, having those family secrets brought out, and now basically saying you're making me the bad guy because maybe I wanted to protect her, or maybe that news was tough for me to handle. I mean, yeah, I know my son was going through a transition, but what about me? How do I have to handle that? I raised her as a boy, and now, what's my role in this now? So there's a lot of dialogue there that deals with adjustment, but now it's become the focal point. And Joe, out of curiosity here, two questions here for you, Joe. Could retaining a lawyer create the perception of guilt? And is this a rational step or an emotional reflex?
Okay, two very good questions, and I think you framed a lot of it really well here. Could that be seen as being guilty, and you ask for an attorney? We all know when we conduct a criminal investigation, you say to somebody, hey, you have a right to remain silent. You go through all their rights, and they say, I want an attorney. And you ask, 9 out of 10 people, why would somebody ask for an attorney? Because they did it and they don't want to talk to you. And you say, okay, I get it. And that's absolutely true. When people have any experience, usually with the criminal justice system, they will often revert to, hey, you know what? Talk to my attorney. I want my attorney here. I'm not talking to you at all. And there's a lot of reasons for that if you wanted to get into it. Could it also be a reflex? I think it can be. We saw in the John Bonet case when that little girl was murdered in her own home. Her parents initially cooperated, and then they got an attorney, and everybody, it was the whole thing turned on that. That's, well, the only reason you get an attorney is if you're guilty. The parents must have done it. And that can turn all of that pressure against you. That can turn a lot of things your way. So can it be seen that way? Yes, 100%. When someone asks for an attorney, it looks like they're trying to protect themselves from something that they've done. Could it be a knee-jerk reaction too? Yes. Unless you've been in the position of this woman who had her son, daughter commit an active shooter incident at a church where children were killed and other people were injured. I don't know that any of us know exactly how we would respond to that. The armchair quarterbacking people, which is not usually helpful. People always imagine from the safety of their living room when they see something, well, this is what I would do. This is how I would handle it. And we find out that most of the time that's not how people would handle it if it was them in the hot seat, so to speak.
Yeah, and obviously we talked about the rationale behind it as well. So yes, it could be emotional because maybe when this happens, someone could also go into survival mode, because you could automatically think, oh my God, they're going to think I was responsible. And because it was my kid, and they could take on that responsibility and go ahead and say, hey, I'm not going to help. I'm going to go get a lawyer because I know if they rip me apart, they're going to get me for being a bad mother. So,
right.
Either way, it could even be, Joe, could it be a mixture of rational thinking and emotional reflex? Could it be a blending of both?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. There's a spectrum here that you don't know. It's individual to the person. When we talk about why would she go out and do this? There's a family out there in Michigan. I believe they're from Michigan. Their last name is Crumbly. Their son was an active shooter. And the Crumbleys came forward and they were investigated. Their house was investigated. Their child was investigated. And the parents were charged criminally with knowledge about what this kid was going to do. And they were both convicted and sent to prison. This has now become a clarion call where everyone is, we're all screaming, that's great. Go after these parents that even if they knew a little bit, they should have done something. What they should have done, there's no specifics to that, but we all feel the need to hold whoever we can responsible. And the Crumley family being charged, and you could say right or wrong, that's a separate case, but they were charged criminally and convicted and went to prison, the mother and the father. So I have to assume that somebody that knows this family may have said to them, hey, in Michigan, they put people in jail. You better get a lawyer. They're going to come after you next. I could imagine that very easily. Or there could be a friend who's an attorney or a friend of a friend. They have an attorney in the family. Hey, listen, they go after families now. Be careful what you say. Maybe you want to have representation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now I want to talk about a parent's bias or a mother's bias in this case. Do they see their child differently? So parents often view their children through a filter of love, history, and loyalty. I also want to add trust at one point. That's what I got from Susan Klebold. She mentioned I had no reason not to trust him. Again, what he did was shocking to us too. It's a very emotional interview. I highly recommend you guys check out that interview. That's what kind of led to this. They may minimize red flags others see clearly, and we mentioned that for many reasons, right? One is maybe they feel responsible, so they don't want to take the onus of that. Or it's their child. I know them. They got the label of my child, the label of someone I love and trust who's never given me a concern. So I'm going to minimize their actions because I think I know them. That's the key. That's why we tend to minimize, because we think we truly know somebody. And sometimes it's just a projection that we put on, a perception of hope that we believe that person to be, until we don't have the energy no longer to put that projection up. And I truly believe that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You see this in high profile criminal cases a lot of times where say the husband is charged with some kind of a deviant kind of a crime. The guy in Long Island, the Long Island serial killer guy, when he was charged, they did a search warrant and his wife filed for divorce right away. She's not protecting him any further when she saw what a hideous thing he's being charged with. Now, in her head, maybe there's lots of things that started falling into line with this guy. Oh my gosh, he was out all these nights. He couldn't tell me where he was. She may have seen something that was suspicious. Now the police show up with a search warrant, lock the guy up and say, yeah, he's killed 6, 8, 10 people. All of a sudden that loyalty ends because that is just so horrific. With a parent, I think it's different. I have seen across my career many, many, many times. Like I don't think I could count on one hand how many times a kid has done something criminal and very bad that the parents jumped in and said, you know what, that kid is really no good. Go ahead and go get him. I don't care. It has happened. I have a hand with 5 things on it. I've seen it sometimes. Almost always the go-to is, wait a minute, something else happened here. My kid didn't do it. If he did it for a reason. Someone else put him up to it. Someone else caused this problem. My kid just happened to be there. They're getting blamed for it. And they support them as best as they can. When it comes to a thing like this, think about this. If that mother had seen the videos that he posted before he did with the magazines loaded with writings all over them and the messages he was putting on the guns and everything, if she had seen all of that, would she have maybe called a family friend, called a counselor, called somebody and said, this is really scary? But if she didn't see any of that, I'm going to guess, and I'm not defending him or her at all in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying, as a parent, you would see your child going through this very, very difficult emotional ringer as they're trying to figure out who they are in life. They're transitioning from one to another. They think they're something different than they are. That's got to be very, very taxing on everybody in that home. Would you think, if you didn't see those videos, you didn't know the kid had all those guns, that they were loading up magazines and going to a church to kill children? Would you think that? I don't think people would. I don't think any of these shooter parents really thought, well, tomorrow's the day my kid's going to go to school and bring a gun and kill 7 people. So I think that's part of the whole disbelief. I can't believe this happened. And like I said, these are the things that I've seen over the course of my career. It wasn't my kid. It was my kid, but for a good reason. Somebody else put him up to it. They're blaming him. He had other reasons to do it, whatever. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I remember an incident happened in Passaic. A female inmate, before she became an inmate, threw a baby into the river. Then when she did her time, the family would still visit her mother and father. So the victim would have been their grandchild. And they pretty much did nothing but pray the whole time while they were there. There was really no communication between them outside of praying. And, there were people that would speak to the grandparents before they came in. And the grandparent said, it is our daughter, but she did kill our grandchild. And it's a very confusing thing for them to have to handle. But they chose to believe for their own survival that the daughter's evil act did not make her an evil person. And they did that so they could survive, because they did not want to accept the fact that what she did was evil, because maybe she could have been evil. So they gave excuses for what she did. But again, it was relevant to their own survival, because if they accepted it, then there's a level of responsibility involved in that would be very hard for them to handle that somewhere along the line we raise someone who would kill our loving grandchild. I mean, how do you?
Yeah. That is an amazing trauma. You know, we don't talk enough about trauma. You know, it's beginning to be spoken about. I wrote a couple of articles recently, and I did a program on the Blue Heart podcast about it, on trauma-informed law enforcement, right? And trauma-informed anything. It's a cliche term now, but what it really means is understanding the traumas that people go through and how it affects them either immediately or sometimes many years down the road. So when we look at these families that have this, it's part of being traumatized that this just happened. I mean, they're just overwhelmed. How overwhelming that would be. And then as it is part of the grief process, because you got to remember this person also killed himself. So now you lost the person themselves. They can't defend themselves. They can't explain to you why. And as you go through the grieving process, part of that is, I don't know what they actually call it. It's kind of like a fantasy land where you start to make up things and you're trying to understand things when it's very traumatic, and you start to put it into place, not just with facts, but what you know, hopeful, wishful thinking, and all of those things I think play a role in what goes on with these families. If it's a long-term trial or lots of evidence comes out, you can see where a family might finally kind of accept, which is the end of the grieving process, that this child, this young person that they raised, that they loved, did this horrible thing. And there's an acceptance, just like there's an acceptance if you had someone die unexpectedly on you. And as you go through it and you go through all these processes, and at the end, there's finally acceptance. Doesn't make it better. You just accept what happened and you try to figure a way to move on. Well, that's, I think, what's probably going on with these people. Look at the Koberger family. They knew right off the bat. They had heard about this case for weeks. These 4 college kids stabbed to death. And now the police are at their house in Pennsylvania locking up their son and talking about him. And he goes in and pleads guilty to the 4. They are traumatized. And I know a lot of people say, well, you know, F them, too bad for them. The parents didn't do it, right? The parents didn't do it. Their child did it. That's one trauma. The fact that it happened, I know all of us as parents, you sit there when you have to send a child to school or you send a child off to church. Now you have to think about this. This is your flesh and blood, and you're concerned. That's a trauma to everybody in the country. So understanding the trauma that goes through people's lives with this, I think we need to give that some thought. And part of that process may be, I need to protect myself here. I can't think, I can't answer correctly, and I'll get an attorney, because people are calling me telling me I should have an attorney. And we also know, depending on how the investigation goes, you were right. You said in the beginning, people can inadvertently give themselves away. Everybody thinks they're great when they're in the hot seat. Oh, they'll never get me. I'll talk my way out. And then they get there and they realize when you have a skilled interviewer, all right, you have somebody sits down with Anthony Gangi and they're trying to talk their way out of something, and you go right around them because you're trained to pay attention to body language, words, how they use it, emotional cues, all of that kind of stuff. And you end up catching them up in it. Well, that's exactly what happens. How do you get to somebody who does something horrible to confess to you? Because that's the process. All of these are processes, and understanding how the human head works is what's part of it. But I think that trauma is important.
Yeah, and I want to mention, guys, if you go back to my older videos, I did a show with Joe a while ago that Joe interviewed somebody and got them to falsely confess on something, which, you know, he didn't mean to do, but it's through the pressure of interrogation, and the person started to believe that they did it. And I don't want to give away too much here, but I would definitely go and check out that video, because, again, you want to help, and then all of a sudden you missay something, then it takes you down a rabbit hole you're not ready for, and all because you misstated something that they took advantage of. And Joe mentioned a lot of good things I want to add on. All because a family accepts something doesn't mean they agree with it. So let's put acceptance and agreement as two different things. It is. I may have to accept something to move forward. There's when they interviewed Susan Klebold, the mother of the Columbine shooter, she stated that it was tough for her to say this because she wasn't she felt she wasn't allowed to feel this, but she said she was also a victim because basically she lost somebody too. She lost her son, but she didn't feel that she could basically say that because her son had caused the hurt. And then when she was sending letters out to try to apologize to the victims or the victims' families, there was one person, and this is actually pretty moving. It got to me. I was eating at Chick-fil-A when I was watching this, and it got to me because of the emotional reaction. But she said one of them asked her, "Who was Ryan?" And no one had asked her that during all of this, and it gave her a chance to open up and basically allow her to grieve because she didn't know she could grieve. And it was just such a powerful dialogue. Now, I'm not saying that Mary Grace Westman is a Susan Clable, but what I am saying is there could be a chance that she is. Now, Joe, I had 3 questions that was asked to me, but I think we already answered 2. We already answered, how do parents' emotions affect their ability to be objective? We covered that. And are parents capable of seeing the full picture, or are they always partial? That relates to the emotion. But this question, I would love for you to explore. How might grief or fear distort memory and perception? Because now, when they're reviewing stuff, now they're going to kind of look at things backwards and then go to the mother with information that they may think she should be aware of, but she isn't. And then she may falsely believe, through the pressure, that she was aware of it. And now she's negligent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think one of those things, when you're living your life day to day and you're going through normal life stuff, that's tough enough. When you have more difficult things going on, when you're raising a child, anyone who knows when you raise children, there's lots of things that go on. Is the kid bullied? Is the kid the superstar? Is the kid popular? The kid not popular? And there's all these kind of things that happen, and you try and help your child through it. You want them to be strong. You want them to be kind. You want them to be courageous. You want them to do right things. And sometimes kids don't follow up to that. They just don't live up to it, and there's all kinds of problems. Well, you jump forward a couple of years, now the kid does something terrible, and you're right. They're going to go back through every incident that they can get their hands on and start looking at that and going, where is the linkage between what happened 3 years ago, what he wrote in a post, what he said to his mother, and what he did at that church? And then they're going to go back to the mother and say, how could you not have seen this? Right? And I think that goes to all of the things that you laid out before. How can a parent be naive to this kind of thing? Because unless you think in your head, my son has showed me he's going to show up and he's going to kill little children at school or at church, I know it's going to happen based on what I've actually seen, heard, or read. If you don't have that kind of evidence in front of you, the kid tells you, oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow, Mom, so have a good night. Unless you have that kind of solid information, who could believe that their kid would do this? Now, I know there's lots of people that have children who have mental issues, and they know they're dangerous, right? They know they might start fights. They might have attacked somebody, right? These things happen. We know that these kind of things happen in life. But do you look back on that and go, well, what was I supposed to do? We went to court. My son went to court, and the judge told him never do it again. Put him in juvenile detention for 4 months. He came out and he did it again, right? What can you do about that? And I think all of that is taking place here behind the scenes that we don't know. You've said it a couple of times. We don't know exactly what went on here, what she's feeling, not feeling. She might have known all along. She might have had that and said to him, you can't do a thing like that. Don't do a thing like that. And then he did it. And she says, what else could I have done? Should I have called somebody? Oh my gosh, am I in trouble now? What's going to happen? I'm sure all of that is like a great big cauldron spinning around right now for everyone involved with this. The victims' families, they're probably going through I know they're going through their own traumas. They're thinking, should I have been in that church with my child? If I had been there, could I have done something? Did I see something outside when I dropped my kid off that I should have went in that place, right? So the word should is a very powerful word that when we use it, it tells us, I should have paid more attention. Well, that's an attack on yourself. I should have looked closer before I left my child there. I should not have dropped them off. I should have stayed with. All those kind of things are an attack on you. So trauma, that whether it's the accused, their family, the suspect, the victims, the people around them, this trauma is something we are finally trying to get our handle on, because it can lead to motive. It can lead to intervention. It can lead to lots of things if we start to pay more attention to it. So to answer your question, to finish up, is I think all of these things really flow together in this particular situation.
Yeah, and I think parents, they fear two things. The greatest fear is going to be death, and then right above that is incarceration. And I think it's funny because incarceration, as long as the child's still alive, some people may accept that. So, like, if I'm reading something and I fear that there is something that's going to happen that can hurt my child or can kill my child, then I want my child incarcerated, right? Or I want my child placed somewhere where they become very controlled. I mean, I've seen that, where if I fear that my child's going to die of a drug overdose on the streets, I'd rather have them arrested in a controlled setting than for them to be on the streets getting high. So death will always be the motivator, or the fear of death will always be a motivator for a parent to, in what their mind could be, betray their child's trust and report them. But most of the time, there's going to be that effort to protect the child. And sometimes that effort could also blind them into what they feel their child is capable of doing. But Absolutely. Once they read something that states that the child may be doing something that can hurt them or can ultimately kill them, then the parents may act, but the action is still in the effort to protect the child. So they're always weighing the consequences of the choice they have to make. And I think part of it is, I don't want to lose my child. I get it. So at one point I don't want to lose my child to the system. So maybe they kind of learn to give excuses for what the child's doing. It's not right or wrong. It's just their parents. They want to protect the child. But when they feel that, wow, this is definitive, like Joe said, and I feel that my child is going to do these things, and ultimately, man, if they wind up killing all these kids, oh my God, that's horrible. And then what are they going to do? Most active shooters kill themselves. That justification, the stronger justification could be, I don't want my child to kill themselves. And at this point, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and protect my child from doing all this.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and now report my child to the system. So this way they may be locked up, but guess what? I still have my child and I can live with that, as opposed to not doing anything. And yeah, I think is that spot on, Joe?
Yeah, I think you're 100% on there. Look at the people that we see. I mean, you see them all the time in the institutions that you're in, where people come and the families come for visits for years. They bring the kids and they try and, see them on holiday. Why? The person did something horrible. What are you doing still? Because they're still your family, right? And I think that parental bond is one of the things that, my kid might have done this bad thing, but something went wrong and it's still my child. And he's being held accountable. He's in prison for 20 years. But it's still my child. And, you try and look past it. And then you add into that other things that we have in our society. We have, you have a religious influence, right? And a lot of people, you see these people that come out and they forgive the killer of their child. They forgive the person who raped and murdered their daughter and left her in a hole in the woods. And you say to yourself, how could that possibly happen? There's a lot of things going on there. That is one way to move on from that grief, and they get that from their religious underpinning. We should forgive the sin, forgive the sinner, but not the sin. Remember, right? But we don't forget, we forgive. And I think there's a lot of that messaging, because it always shocks me when I see some father come out and say, I forgive this guy for what he did to my daughter. I'll never forget it, but I forgive him. I hope he, finds his life in God in jail and this and that. And you listen to that and you say, how is that possible? Well, I can tell you, the power of forgiveness is so amazing that I've gone through it in my life, where I actually had to forgive some very, very painful things. And I did. And it freed me. It freed me from that. I don't have to live with it every single day. And I think that's part of that entire grieving and healing process. My kid did this. He's in jail, but he's still alive. Why do they fight so hard to fight the death penalty? Because, well, at least I know you're in prison. You're still alive. I can send you a letter. I can come and see you. You're still in the world. You're not dead. The Kohlberger family, they're all, okay, we'll plead to these 4 things. Just don't kill him, right? It's very, very powerful, and it kind of separates them from the act that the person committed. Like you were saying, that I want to protect my kid, but I'll turn him in if that'll prevent my kid from doing this horrible thing so that they have all these consequences. When at the same, we now just cut off all the victims that they're going to hurt. That you think would be the number one thing to worry about, innocent victims. But it's not. We look at our family. We say, oh my gosh, if I could stop my kid from doing this, he might get in trouble, but at least he's not going to kill himself. Well, I think it's tough. It's tough understanding the noggin.
Yeah, and also I want to mention something. Remember, in this case here, you love the person, not what they've done. And I think that, when, again, just looking at the Susan Klebold situation, but I'm sure it could be the same with Mary Grace. But again, we're still finding out who she is that, when the shooter does take their own life, there's going to be no closure for them either. Was I a part of this? I'll never know. And when they never know, they're going to take it on. They're just going to take it all on because who else can absorb it?
Right.
Someone's got to absorb it. So who else is going to absorb it? And I think that is also a powerful message, because in the end, nobody wants to see the mother being a victim. But at some level, she's going through a loss as well. And sometimes, it's a loss that they don't know how to grieve, because they don't know if they're allowed to grieve, because at the end of the day, I'm grieving for a killer, but you're also grieving for your son. Right. You're grieving for your daughter. And I think it's okay to cry for that, because you're still their mother. And at the end of the day, you're picturing their innocence, it's very tough to balance. And that kind of leads us into the next section, Joe, is the role of shock and denial. So sudden crisis leaves families overwhelmed. Denial can serve as a psychological coping mechanism, and parents may cling to narratives that protect them emotionally, even if reality suggests otherwise. Now, I think we discussed, is denial a form of self-preservation, or is it avoidance of truth? We kind of touched on that. And we also touched a little bit on, can parents in shock make sound legal decisions? We talked about that with emotional reaction versus is this emotional reflex or a good reaction? But this question, and if you want to also add the other two, it's your call, but how should law enforcement or legal counsel approach families in this state of shock or denial? Or in another case, what about outside media, the pressure from society? I mean, is there a chance that they should be able to understand shock and denial from the mother of the shooter, or the father of the shooter, the parents ultimately, or those that love them?
I think in the state of our current society, I don't think we're going to see a lot of empathy or understanding for this mother. Over time, we might, like you said, once we find out who she really is, she knew nothing about it. We can all say, how would you not know? And then we'll see through the history. I think the Klebold woman, I think I saw an interview of her. It might have been the same one that you were talking about, where, 3 days before they went on the shooting spree in Columbine, this young man went to the prom, and he was at the house with his girl, and he's in his tuxedo. And the mother had no idea that 3 days later, they would be one of the most infamous active shooters that there was, and he's going to murder 20 people. So when they look at their kid, they're not looking at their kid, the active shooter murderer. They're looking at their kid who did something bad, right? I think there's a separation there. So when it comes to understanding, how this is going to go forward, I think it all has to come out, and we have to find out exactly what happened here before we can make these kinds of decisions. But it's murky at the moment. Who knew what?
Yeah. Now I also have here. Next part I have is feeling scrutinized and judged. Again, a reason why they would retain counsel. That's all within these categories. So parents may feel as though they're on trial in the court of public opinion, which we touched on. Fear of stigma, shame, or social judgment that influences decisions. And sometimes hiring counsel is as much about optics as it is about legal necessity. The 3 questions that came my way were, I think we covered some of these, but Are parents justified in feeling scrutinized? I usually ask one question at a time, but I think we covered some of this. So, Joe, if you don't mind, and you have a great memory, I'll give you 3 questions. Maybe you could take what you feel from it and make it your own. So, are parents justified in feeling scrutinized? How does community pressure affect family behavior during investigations? And we really did touch on that. And does retaining counsel silence parents when transparency might actually help? Now, real quick, in the Emmanuel Harrow case, they went for counsel because they knew the story was becoming inconsistent. And I agree with the public's opinion. There's just a lot in play here. And I think their counsel was to protect their own interest and not to help find Emmanuel Harrow. But I think in this case, this could be a bit more different. But Joe, what's your thoughts on those questions?
Well, I think, going for an attorney and trying to get that, there is all kinds of pressure. Can a parent do the right thing under that circumstance? You see all of these people that we find out later on actually did it. Scott Peterson. We see how he went out there and he was given press conferences, and we saw these people giving press conferences going on and on and on. And they end up saying something stupid. They end up saying something that gives away some information. They contradict themselves. And that's why when you have an attorney prevents you from doing all of that. So is it rational? Anytime you're involved with the legal system, as an investigator, I would love people to come forward and go, I want to help and let me just talk and tell you everything I know. But I also know that the reality is, as you said earlier here in our get together, is that sometimes the investigators can pull things out that are abstract. They're not connected, but they can connect them if they're, depending on what their motives are. Good motives. They want to hold people accountable. And, oh, well, you said this, and now that makes it look inconsistent. Sometimes people are inconsistent because they forget something, then they remember something. So getting the attorney, I know for me personally, my kids are all good. They're all good kids and they're all professionals now. But I told each and every one of them, if you do something stupid, and I'm not talking an active shooter, you do something stupid and you end up talking with the police, you tell them, my father's a law enforcement officer and I should have an attorney, because you can say the wrong thing innocently. And I can see these parents out there, especially now, knowing that the Crumbly family went to prison for their involvement in this. But I think it can make people very wary. I think people are not sure what to do. And the pressure, the outside pressure must be horrible. I'm sure getting hate mail. I'm sure she's getting all kinds of things. People are calling her, all kinds of names for allowing her son to transition first. Number 2, he was an evil person, and how did you not know that? I'm sure that pressure is horrific, probably for her and her family, because we see that during the Sandy Hook situation, when those kids got killed, those families, victims' families, had to have officers assigned to them, because you had this whole world of nuts out there saying it never really happened. These kids were actors. You're making it up. You're just trying to take people's guns. You didn't really have a kid. These people had officers assigned to them for a very long period of time, because people were threatening them. They were coming out. They were saying things to them. I'm sure that pressure, this woman is feeling that as well. And Anthony, you couldn't have said it enough times. She may be completely innocent of this. We can all armchair quarterback and say she should have seen it. She should have done 20 other things. See that word should, how that keeps jumping up. Or she could have known the whole thing, and she is completely involved. She does have culpability. We will find out as time comes down the road. But again, armchair quarterbacking this and saying, well, this is what I would do. You have no idea what you would do if this happened to you or your family.
Yeah. And as I said, guys, I only did this video because you get the extremes of politics. I mean, could they both be an issue? They could be, but it's like it's either one issue or the other. It's like maybe they're a mixture of both. I mean, it's just we kept the good dialogue open on the other episode, so please watch it. And I have one more area to cover, then we get to the closing questions, Joe. So I have the bigger picture versus fragmented pieces. Guys, remember something here real quick. We see the pattern looking backwards as opposed to people in the moment dealing with it very fluid and in real time. And also how I see somebody could cause me to minimize or dismiss certain things that could be pattern related. So there's a lot in play here, because I'm not looking at my son or daughter objectively. I'm looking at them very subjectively. So I have a way to minimize things that could be part of a bigger pattern. But then when looked at through the context of the bigger picture, yeah, of course, anybody could piece things together and make up their own pattern at some extent because you have the end result. But to pass judgment on somebody and expect them to see a pattern that we only see clearly now, I think doesn't allow for a real-time understanding of how you see things in an isolated fashion, and really don't connect things until you really know what you're looking at overall. So a lot of the times when something is caught ahead of time, it's because someone wind up acting on a gut feeling without having anything contextual. Just they had experience, they looked at something objectively, and they jumped on it before the picture could be created. And they don't care whether they're right or wrong. They just do it because they felt something didn't feel right. Now, outsiders often see the broader narrative more clearly than those inside the storm. Again, there's so much being said there. Parents may focus on isolated details while missing patterns, because patterns to what? I don't have a picture yet. So I'm not going to see patterns because I really don't know what the end result is going to be. So even in corrections, we teach people to identify patterns because we have an understanding of what that bigger picture is, because we've been in the business, but the patterns still relate to a bigger picture. We have to educate the newer officers on what that bigger picture is so they can understand the patterns of manipulative behavior and whatnot, but there's still a picture that the patterns evolve into. And then love and protection can act as blinders. Hey, Joe, do parents ever truly grasp the big picture when their child is accused of something horrific, or does emotional closeness become a liability, blinding them until truth collides with loyalty and forces them to reconcile love with reality?
Yep. Well, I think that's been my experience that parents will often, family members will often circle the wagons around the person. Like I said, this isn't right. The cops are picking on him for no reason. This is not, my child could never do this. Somebody else did something that led to my child being involved in this, or they influenced them or something like that. And we do see a lot of that. There is a time, though, for most people, most clear thinking people, that there's a recognition that this actually did happen and my kid actually did this. And now how do I deal with that? And you're talking about patterns, Anthony. It's in my books. That's what I talk about, teaching criminal investigation. Human beings live for patterns. That's what we do. So at the end of an event, you can look and you're right. Armchair quarterbacks. Oh, well, why didn't they see all of this? Well, when it's happening, like you said, there's no pattern to put together because you're not seeing the pattern of what? Pattern of school shooting? Well, if you give me that picture, now I can go backwards and find, oh, that's why he was visiting all those elementary schools, and that's why he was doing. Now it makes sense, right? So these things there's a confluence of them, how they come together, and the bigger picture from experience, like you said, exactly what you're saying, is what I do. My bigger picture, understanding human patterns, how people do things, why they do them, the words they use, the way they use them. This might be a brand new criminal in front of me, but it's not the first criminal in front of me. And I understand people trying to get out from under, trying to lie, trying to obfuscate what happened, trying to get away from responsibility. And that's all part of the process of a criminal investigator, to wear all those things down. You have the bigger picture. One of the things I think investigators sometimes have a problem with is that you have to come up with an investigative hypothesis. Based on what happened here, I think this. The problem we get with investigators, and I'm sure you've seen this in your career, is that people jump on it. It's always the husband. It's always the wife. It's always this one. And that their whole case is wrapped around their belief that it's always. And then they try to make everything fit. And when it doesn't, they bend the facts to fit. Things don't sound right, but they go around it. And that happens. You have to have, here's my hypothesis. I think this is what happens, what it looks like. But let me be open to every other possibility. And I have to run down every other possibility as though those other possibilities are real, they could be the reason that this happened, or the way that this happened, or who did it. And it might totally change my original hypothesis. But if you're not open to that, don't understand that bigger picture, you won't. And that's where you see sometimes investigations go crazy, and you say, after the trial and the person's found not guilty, and you something else, you say, how did they ramrod this case through? Because this is what they believe. They found some facts that matched it, and you can get people indicted. You can go to trial and be a great witness, and everybody believes you, and they convict them. But how many people are we finding now that were convicted that way, and DNA is getting them removed from prisons because it turned out when they said, I didn't do it, even though 19 people said you did, and the evidence and the investigation said you did, you really didn't, right? And as an investigator, I have to be open to that, right? I look at it and I say, I think Anthony did this, but let me find out other things and find out maybe he didn't do it. Let me investigate that as well, that maybe he didn't do it. That's part of my responsibility. Long question, long answer, but I hope that's what you were looking for.
Joe, I mean, I know, Joe, but it's spot on. I mean, there's a lot to discuss. We try to go ahead and try to provide an objective perspective so people can take what they want, apply it how you see fit. As we were watching, YouTube and all this other stuff, it's just so one-sided, and I'm starting to find videos that I can maybe challenge a little bit more, because sometimes you're sitting there, you're getting frustrated with what you see, and say, well, you know what? Why not put it out there and just be respectful with it? And at the end of the day, your objective or our objective is just to provide a clear understanding, or in our case, maybe just a vent, that maybe that could just be healthy for us. But I know I've always learned this. Sometimes I'm not the only one thinking it. So start the conversation, see where it goes. I know when we first did the video, people were like, hey, it's a he, and they were pushing the aggressive transgender view, and I'm not going to do that. I mean, I work in a position where I'm appointed. I'm really not able to really strongly take one side or the other on this, because regardless of what I believe, I have to be objective in how I handle people, because if I'm not, especially in my position, that will be used against me. So if someone claims that she's a she and the rights say that she could claim that or he could claim that, then my job is to protect that right as best I can until it becomes a conflict with someone else's safety. So with that said, even with the gun rights, I mean, everything has to be absolute. It's not the case. Why do we not go in the middle? Why does arguments like this have to be one of, if you stand on extremes, it becomes win-loss. You stand in the middle, it's compromise. It was weird. But the problem is we don't trust each other. And conflicts truly are conflicts, because in the end, if there's no trust, conflicts become personal. And you can't have dialogue to hold people personally accountable unless there's trust. Because once you have trust, you can have conflicts about ideas and strategies, because that's how you grow. And then eventually after that, personal accountability can happen, because we all feel committed. And it's okay that we may not agree. But moving forward, at least we're all aligned. We spend so much time trying to agree, and when at the end of the day I'm not looking for agreement. I'm looking to give everybody a chance to speak, and then once they all speak, then we make our decision. At the end of the day, everybody had a chance to speak their mind, but I want alignment. The biggest concern in our world, especially with politics, is always going to be the meeting after the meeting. It's what's said after the decisions have been made. And in cases like this, when it's more about one side or the other, or proving I'm going to win this and you're going to lose this, nothing gets resolved that way. It's just jockeying for position. Hey, Joe, anything you like to say in closing?
Well, I would. There's an old saying that when I first heard it many years ago, it made a lot of sense to me when we talk about interacting with each other as people. And you're talking about, the politics of a thing, and it can be twisted one way or another to meet agendas. And criminal investigation is not about that. Criminal investigation is about the truth, whichever way it goes. But I heard this saying one time. It says, people do not listen to understand. They listen to respond. Now, we probably all have heard that in some form or other throughout our lives. But when you think about it, that's really the truth. When two people are talking, unless they're aligned, like you said, like, we're going to find the truth here. No matter where it goes, we're not out here to attack anyone or anything. Let's find out what really happened and why it happened. See if we can prevent the next one from happening, or find justice for those people it happened to. When we're listening just so that I can jump back at you, I'm not listening to understand what you're saying. And I think that is a common problem that people have. You talk about patterns. That is a huge human being pattern when it comes to interacting. And that's why we argue so much. That's why we fight so much, right? Some people are, this is absolutely the reason this happened and it's bad. That had nothing to do with it and it's all good. No, let's have a conversation and see what actually happened and try and figure out why. It could be a combination of both. It could be nothing of either one. So I think that's probably a good takeaway that I get from this whole thing. And I've always taken away from investigating crimes. I'm about the truth, right? And trying to find out who did what and why they did it so I can help prevent the next one.
All right. Now, guys, there are some opinions on the other side. I'm reading a message now that this was a transgender mom who was a shooter at Catholic school. I heard she hired a criminal defense attorney. No one understands why, but I guess she's so distraught she can't answer any questions. That's what I've heard, if that's the same case. But even here, they have all the videos. They had multiple reports of child abuse. Those children are still with their father. So that question, what questions should people ask? How do you protect children? So, it's still good to provide this perspective. So when it goes into the court of public opinion, people are drawing from a good objective perspective as opposed to drawing from something without knowing what the other side is. And guys, if you get a chance, please check out the other video we did. Check out the content, because I really do need active viewers, but I need active engagement. So the content we produce goes to a greater audience, because I did get a lot of traffic last week, but it slowed down. So I'm hoping you guys are more active again. Keep the likes going, keep the engagement going. Go back and check out the older content. Me and Russ did a show about 3 inmates that he dealt with on death row, which was really good. And then I did one on dealing with inmates which on death row, which is really good, because I talk about things that were that affected me. And I didn't care when I did the dialogue. The perspective that people may see is definitely the perspective that people get from that is not a perspective ever been given before. Even my wife watched it and she didn't know. There's a lot of things I share because it kind of is like my journal. And then, guys, one last thing, if you could, don't forget I have that book on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. Hey, Joe, I'm going to sign off. Before I sign off, how can I find you? What do you got going on?
Yep. Okay. Well, you can find our police-based podcast on YouTube. Also on other places that you get your podcast. It's called the Blue Heart webcast on YouTube, and it's called the Blue Heart podcast in other places, right? Because that's what they make you call them. So you go to youtube.com/@Blue Heart webcast, and you'll find our police-based webcast. I do a school safety program as well. It's another YouTube program. It's called Hope is Not a Tactic. Right. And it's all about school safety and security for any facility, really. But I focus on schools a lot. And that is youtube.com/@HopeIsNotATactic. You go there and I do how to do good drills, how to worry about the equipment in the school, how to deal with the staff, how to do de-escalation, all this kind of stuff. You can go that. And I have my books. Let me see what I got here. I got my books. This is called The Investigation. All right. This is how to do a criminal investigation soup to nuts. It is based on a real brutal double homicide I investigated, and I tell it like a story, and then I go back and teach everyone how to investigate it. And that's from blue360media.com. You can get my books, and you can get them you can get them on Amazon, lots of different places. I never mind anybody reaching out. Anthony will put my email address in the show notes. And I don't mind answering questions or following up with other people. So, Anthony, thank you for having me here and let me have a voice in this very, very important discussion.
Yeah. Well, and Joe, real quick, what is your email again?
Joe@pangarotraining.com.
Joe@pangarotraining.com.
That's it.
All right. So, guys, I'm going to post it up on the screen real quick. Joe, make sure this is correct.
That's it.
And that's his email, guys. He answers all the questions that you send his way. And as always, guys, stay safe.